Good evening. I'd like to welcome everyone to our first installment of our District Advisory Committee meeting. Tonight we will be covering the LCAP goals and two infographics, which is part of the alignment of the district's effort to address all of our students' needs, but also provide equity and access to all of our student populations. So this evening we're going to review the greater part of the state program around state priorities and the state measurement system known as CASP, and that will lead to our LCAP goals and the infographics, and our Associate Superintendent, Mr. Thor Harrison, will present that information to you this evening.
Thank you, Dr. Nicholas. Thank you. Okay, good evening. So tonight I'm going to talk a little bit about our LCAP, Local Control Accountability Plan, local indicators. Now, before I do that, I want to talk about our LCAP 8 state priorities. There are 8 priorities when it comes to the Local Control Accountability Plan. 1 is basic conditions of learning. 2 is state standards, or the conditions of learning. 3 is parental involvement or engagement. 4 is pupil achievement or pupil outcomes. 5 is pupil engagement. 6 is school climate. 7 is course access and conditions of learning. And 8 is other pupil outcomes. You'll note that there are underlines under 1, 2, 3, 6, and 7. The reason that I've underlined those state priorities is because as a school district, we are required to have local indicators as well for those priorities. That's what I'm going to review with you. So just a reminder, our LCAP goals, our first LCAP goal is systematic closure of the opportunity gaps, which addresses priority 1, 2, 4, 5, and 8. And then what does that look like? What does systematic closure of the opportunity gaps look like in practice? Well, we're going to conduct a district-wide analysis of summative and formative data identifying children whose performance lags behind their peers and or peer group. Identification of root causes within the system. LCAP Goal 2, instruction and curriculum efficacy, which addresses priority 2, 6, and 7. And what does that look like in practice? Continue implementation of the new ELA, ELD curriculum and math units of study started in 1718 by emphasizing high quality strategic support for all students using data systematically. And then our third goal, our final goal, 21st century outcomes and stakeholder communication, which addresses priority 1 and 3. What does that look like? Develop an articulation plan that addresses the need for creating a district-wide culture. Build legacy opportunities and a sense of oneness in our district systems, which would include all stakeholders. So let's talk about priority 1 and what that looks like, the basic conditions of learning. As we address priority 1 for our local indicator, we have to meet the Williams settlement requirements. We have to report our facilities, which are in good repair. We have to report about appropriately credentialed teachers, and that all students have access to standards-aligned instructional materials. Priority 2, they use what's called a reflection tool, and it's simply a toggle that selects between 1 and 5, 1 being low, 5 being high on the rating scale. So the reflection tool rates the LEA's progress towards recently adopted academic standards. So if you look at ELA, ELD, there's a 5 next to it. That means that we are at the highest level of implementation for that content. And you can see down at NGSS we're at 3, CTE 4, Health 5, PE 5. Let's look at high school social or history social studies. We're at a 1. Now a year ago we were at a 3. The reason that we're at a 1 now moving forward is because we're looking at new content for next school year. So we're in the process now of looking at content and publishers to implement the new standards in our social studies classes. So we put ourselves back at a 1 because we're not at the starting point again. As you move down to world language, we're at a 5, and at professional learning, which is professional development for teachers and administrators, we're at a 5. Priority 3 involves parental involvement and engagement. So we use survey results from the Healthy Kids Survey and the local Lambertsville Unified School District survey results. I put some examples up here of the results that we use to report this indicator. 73% of parents surveyed agreed that LUSD schools prepare students academically for success in life. 62% of parents surveyed believe LUSD challenges their students to develop their academic potential. And then 77% of parents believe the schools of LUSD communicate effectively and timely. Parental participation of students with exceptional needs is also an indicator for priority 3. Priority 6 involves school climate. So once again, we use survey results. The survey results we use are the Healthy Kids Survey, and we also use our local LUSD survey. So I'd like to point out that the Healthy Kids Survey and the LUSD survey moving forward will be given on opposite years, because the Healthy Kids Survey is a survey provided by the state, and it's given every other year. So on off years, Lambertsville Unified will give a survey that addresses these needs for parental communication and student outcomes. So some of the survey results that we used for the Healthy Kids Survey are 87% of 5th grade students feel safe or very safe at school. 74% of 7th grade students feel safe or very safe at school. And 73% of 9th grade students feel safe or very safe at school. You'll notice that it's grades 5, 7, and 9. Those are the grade levels that the Healthy Kids Survey surveys. Those are also the grade levels that we survey with our local survey. Some of the outcomes that we realized from the surveys are that we need to work on our student connectedness to school. We need to get that positive connection for all students to be connected to school. Priority 7, which is a new priority this year, it was added for this school year. Priority 7 is also a reflection tool, which is a narrative. Students have access to a broad course of study. In other words, we address Education Code 51210, which means all of our students have access to English, social studies, science, math, health, PE, all the core content. And this would include unduplicated and special ed student groups. It also indicates that our students have access to intervention and remediation for the unduplicated student groups. Things like success period at the high school, in-class and after-school remediation at our K-8s, online learning and digital support. Also, Priority 7 addresses student access to programs and any barriers there may be to access. Access to CTE, access to AP. I put the PSAT up there under AP, which is advanced placement, because if we look at the results from the PSAT test, which we give to all 10th graders as a district, we can discover what students can get more rigor or should get more rigor in their class schedule. So we can go through all the students that show AP potential, and we can schedule those kids, or at least talk to those students and their parents about, hey, you did really well in this section of the PSAT, you should take this AP class, or take this honors class, bump up the rigor. Any questions?
Is it on? Okay. During the board meeting, when you presented this, you gave a little bit of color on the safety, the perception of safety, and mentioned that, it's not like 27% of 9th grade students feel unsafe. It's that a significant portion were unsure or no opinion, right?
That's correct.
On the previous slide, when I look at 62% of parents surveyed believe LUSD challenges their students to develop their academic potential, I was wondering if there's a similar component where it's like, well, they're really not sure. Like in that one, was it 60% believe that they're challenged and the rest don't, or is there a similar component where they just really weren't sure?
There was a similar component of being unsure. I don't know the number off the top of my head. It was a 4-level survey. And remember that that's grades 5, 7, and 9. So fifth grade parents may not be certain yet of the rigor that their students are receiving is challenges their students, or they may, I'm unsure. However, yes, there are 4 levels on that survey.
On the 62% one, I would be interested to see a little bit more detail.
Bet.
I have a question related to the same thing. On the results where the bar is, 70% right now, I should say, is there a goal, or do you have a goal in mind of where you'd want to be?
Yeah, are you referring to these ones here?
Yes, I forgot my glasses, but yes, that's the one.
So my goal I would be 100% of kids feel safe at school. I can speak to these survey questions because I have done further research for the board on these questions. 2% of students in each of these sections, except for fifth grade, it was 1%, felt unsafe. So the difference between that 1% or 2% and the 74, 73, and 87, those the rest were unsure or had no opinion.
Could those results have anything to do with the youthfulness of the child as they're in school, as they spread their wings and they become a little bit more grounded and sure of themselves, their comfort level goes up?
I would guess
Because
that
it looks like the age range, it goes a little higher. The bar goes a little higher on that, as far as how they feel about school. But I guess my question, I was kind of zeroing in on Mr. Collins' question, and that is for the surveys with the parents. When you go and when you look at how the parents feel about how the school is doing and placement, do you have a goal? Is it the same 100% you'd like for the parents to raise that number, raise that percentage?
So the next time we give a survey and give a similar question, I'd be looking for those numbers to grow.
Okay.
We would want them to grow.
And probably the last part of that question that's curious to me is that in order to get it to grow, what tools have you thought about or put in place to try to assist or change the perception of the parents to let them know that we're doing X, Y, and Z and get them involved, that we're doing a lot of things, and to get the parent support? Because I do realize that parents have a lot to do with their attitude toward learning, and homework has a lot to do with the child's progress.
I would agree with that. I would assert that the goal that we've established for the students would be similar with the parents, and that's connectedness. We need to get them connected with the school so they know exactly what's going on at the school and what is going on in the classroom and what extracurricular and co-curricular activities we have, and that we can get their kids involved with, that they can be involved with. I think there's a parallelism there between the parents and the students and getting them connected. The more connected they are, I think the more they'll realize what their students are experiencing. So overall, I mean, our goal is to get these folks, these constituents, our students and our parents, really connected to our schools. The students connected in not only academia, but those co- and extracurricular activities, and the parents as well, but in a different way.
With the youth department, the YAC, I tell them that, when you don't have homework assigned to you, and you feel that when you get home, you did your homework at school. Well, my theory, if you do your homework at school, then it certainly wasn't homework. But that aside, I try to tell them that if you don't put in the extra time, whether you have homework or not, your competition is. So everybody is putting in the extra time, and if you don't do it, you're going to be that much further behind than your competition.
I would agree. Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, I will move on to our infographic. Oh, did I press the wrong button? Okay. All right. I pressed it twice, sorry. There we go. Okay, I think at your desk you have an infographic that says Goal 1 in the top left, and that's the front page. On the back, it would say Goal 2 and Goal 3. Before I get into the data and get into all of the different items on this infographic, I kind of want to walk you around the organization of the infographic first. If you're anything like me, the first thing you start looking at is data and you start digesting the data. But give me a moment to kind of walk you through the document. So as you can see, it's Goal 1, systematic closure of opportunity gaps, at the far top left. Moving to your right, you'll notice that it says state priorities addressed, state standards 2 and 4. State standards and pupil achievement, and those are indicators 2 and 4 for the 8 priorities for the state for LCAP. You'll find that under pupil achievement, right below goal, it says has a 4 next to it. Then if you move to your right, all the way into the gray area at the top, it says state standards, and there's a 2. Those are the state priorities that are being addressed for those data sets. Now, as we go through this and as you get more familiar with the eight priorities for LCAP, there's a bunch of crossover, but this was the best way to organize this document. So I'm going to start with the colored boxes on the left under Goal 1. But before I talk about them, when this goes live on our website, and please know that this is a draft, this is draft 5, and if you see any mistakes or you find anything that looks like it's an error, please let me know. We still have some other groups to run this through to check data and make sure everything is completely accurate. However, once it's posted on the website, each of those colored boxes up there, you'll be able to hover on the box and it'll give you a little summary, a little background on what each of those items are. What the infographic shows right here is a thumbnail sketch of each of those data sets. So when you hover over it on the website, it'll give you a little summary. So let's go through this. So where it says 58, the percent of AP tests with 3 or higher. So there's 58% of our students at the high school received a 3 or higher on their AP test. Those of you that don't know, 3 or higher is considered passing on an advanced placement test. You'll notice that it says 33% on a little acorn right next to it. That's the percentage of students at our high school that are enrolled in AP classes. That's a really high number. It's a really good number. And then still moving to the right, you'll notice we have the AP pass rate of 3 or higher by ethnicity. 56% Black, 48% Hispanic, and so on. And you'll note as we go down this chart, those are the same focus groups that we break out for each of these data sets. Moving to your right, the blue box at the top, the 80 and the 43 represent the percent ready and conditionally ready as dictated by the EAP, which is the Early Assessment Program. The Early Assessment is a portion of the CASP, the California Assessment for Student Performance. It's a portion of the CASP in both ELA and math. And what they are dedicated questions that are asked that the CSU system and the UC system feel are adequate to give students conditionally or ready for college. And what does that mean to those systems? That means no remedial math, no remedial English. It means no essay requirement to get entrance into a CSU English class for those students that are matriculating onto college. So we have 80% in ELA and 43% in math. And then moving to the left, you can see the breakdown by focus group. I'm going to go back to the left of the green, 48.7, A to G readiness. This is the percent of students that complete 15-year-long courses with a C or better. So 48.7% of our students are A to G ready. A to G is a course offering that our students must complete to be qualified to get into the UC system here in California. You'll notice moving to the right, we then have it broken down by focus group. Moving to the right, the next green box that has the A+. This is the percent of 9 through 12 students with a GPA of 3.0 or higher. This is at the end of the second semester. So we had 63% of our students had a grade point average of 3 or higher. Moving to the red box to the left and down one. This is the percent of 912 students with at least one D or one F. So 25% of our students had at least one D or one F in the 17-18 school year. Moving to the right, it's broken out by focus group. Moving to the right once again, the 75 and the 75 is not a typo. I've checked it a bunch of times because I didn't think it could be 75 and 75, but it is. It is the percent proficient on the NWE MAP assessment. This is an interim assessment that we give students in both English, language arts, and math to test readiness for students in grades 4 through 11. Moving down and to the left, in the
Mr. Harrison?
Yes, sir.
Really quick before we move on, as a conceptual question to make sure I understand the graphic, on the percent of 9 to 12 students with at least one D or F, 2017 to 2018, the way I'm interpreting this graph, the focus group is actually performing better than the population as a whole because the percent is higher in the box, or am I totally
No,
misunderstanding?
you are accurate. Mm-hmm.
Okay, I just want to make sure I understood.
Yep.
All right.
Thank you. So if you move down to the mustard color, 73% of the students are on track at third trimester. This is for the DRA, and this is the diagnostic reading assessment that is given at grades K3. So 73% of the students in those grade levels at our schools are performing at or above proficient. You'll notice the focus group breakdown, if you move to the right, is next to that number. Moving right, you'll see our CASP scores. So 69% of our students were proficient in English language arts, and it reads 61. It should actually read 60 because I believe our number was 60.28, and that should round down, not round up. So that will be repaired on this draft. And then you'll note that there is a breakdown by focus group to the left. ELA is the left number, math is the right number. And before we move on this chart, I'd like to point out you'll notice that there's a little bit of a disparity there in math. And some of the things that we're doing to address that in math is we've hired a coach from the county to work with our teachers. We're working on hiring highly qualified math teachers. And we have a new math content that was launched last year, and teachers are getting better at delivering that content each year. At the high school and at the lower grades. I'm going to move on to the enrollment by ethnicity. That's the chart at the bottom. That shows you the raw number and the percent of students enrolled by ethnicity in our K-8 and our 9-12. So we've taken a quick look at this goal 1, which is really the largest group of data that we have for our students. You'll note that our students outperform state and local school districts. But what we're looking at as a school district is equity. We want to make sure there's equity across focus groups and across students, that everybody's getting that same high level education across the board. And in doing so, we're analyzing the gaps in performance, gaps that we see by focus group, and gaps that we see interdepartmentally as well. So let me move on to the gray area where it says state standards 2, implementation of the academic content and standards for all pupils, including ELs. We included here professional learning because this is a part of this focus area. We had 427 teachers get one-on-one coaching sessions this year. That is a great tool that we have here in our district. We have a number of coaches that go into classrooms and not only provide model lessons, but coach teachers in the classroom setting. Not only in content, but in practice. 28 teachers are in the Blended Learning Academy. That's a professional development for teachers. And 2,396 teachers have accessed our Kite online learning, which are lessons related to technology and other items on an online delivery system. And that is a duplicated count. The next item is the LPAC assessment. The LPAC assessment is the new assessment that we give our English language learners. We had 515 students take the LPAC assessment, and 79% of the students scored at the top 2 LPAC levels. The top 2 LPAC levels are bridging and expanding. And at the bottom here, this is a kind of a repeat of the presentation I gave in the PowerPoint, and this is the instructional materials that are aligned to the adopted curriculum, and it's a rating scale, 1 to 5, and you see the English language arts, English language development, mathematics rates a 5, next gen science standards rates a 3, and then social studies rates a 5. Are there any questions before I flip over to goals 2 and 3? I know this is like drinking from a fire hose. Okay. Goal number 2. Note goal number 2 addresses LCAP goals 1, 3, and 6. You'll note at the top here where it says percent of students with standards aligned to curriculum, we have 100% of our students with access to standards aligned to curriculum. We have 0 misassignments of teachers, and the percent of facilities in good repair is 100%. If you scroll down, there's parent involvement. Some of the indicators we use for parent involvement are volunteers. The count on the left, I see a mistake. It should say volunteers there. It just says parent. The 2016-17 parent volunteer count was 296 parents. And those parents went through HR, did the background check, and they're actually in our classrooms working with our kids as active participants. And then 2017-18, we had 213 parents come in and volunteer in the classroom. Moving to the right, you'll note that I used some of the data from our parent survey. 73% of parents think LUSD schools prepare students academically for success in life. That's grades 5, 7, and 9 as noted. And 77% of parents believe LUSD schools communicate effectively and timely, and that's grades 5, 7, and 9.
Mr. Harrison,
Yes, sir.
going back to basic.
Yes.
I'm gonna expose my ignorance. I'm not sure I know what we mean when we say misassignments of teachers.
A misassignment of a teacher would be, for example, let's say you had a health teacher, health credentialed at the high school, and you had that health teacher teaching English. That would be a misassignment.
That's
if they didn't have
what
a teaching
I thought it
credential
meant.
in English.
That's what I thought it meant. Okay.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay. Now it's under school climate, which addresses priority 6. This is the numbers on the left in the mustard color are the number of suspensions by year. You'll notice the year is in the middle. And the numbers on the right are expulsions by year. So for example, in 2014-15, we had 47 students get suspended. That's a duplicated count. What that means is there were 47 incidences of suspension. Thor Harrison could have been 6 of them. Does that make sense? So it's duplicative. And then on the right, the expulsions for 2014-15 are 0. 15-16, you'll see the expulsions are 1 and the suspensions are 133. And then 16-17, you'll notice 187 with 4 expulsions on the right. Now you'll notice at the bottom, subgroup suspension rates for 2016-17. Black African American were at 9.9%. That is an unduplicated count. You'll see a different number later. The number you'll see later is duplicated. Hispanic at 4.5%, EL at 1%, socioeconomically disadvantaged at 4.7%, special education at 6.8%. So then we look at disproportionality. And remember what I talked about earlier about equity. We're looking at the same thing when we look at discipline, we look at attendance, we're still looking at equity. There was a disproportionate number of black students, 6.7% of the total enrollment or population, 17.4% of the total suspensions. That's a duplicated count. In other words, if Dr. Nicholas got suspended 5 times and I got suspended 3 times, that total count would be 8. So we count each suspension occurrence. And then you'll note there at the bottom, like under goal 1, we have enrollment by student group. So we have socioeconomically disadvantaged, EL, and SPED for K-8 and 9-12, so you can see the breakdown of those focus groups. I'll move on to goal 3, 21st century outcomes and stakeholder communication. So the first flag here is 96% attendance rate, and then you'll see our focus group attendance rate below. This is as a district. You'll notice our chronic absenteeism, it is 8.5%. Chronic absenteeism are students that receive 3 or more unexcused absences in a given school, in a given semester or trimester. Then you'll note our graduation rate is at 98%, and then you can see the breakdown by focus group under that. And then our dropout rate is at 0.5%, and you can see the focus group breakout below that. And that'll address priority 5. Now, course access, which addresses priority 7, you'll notice that we have the Canvas analytics for grades 6 through 12. We wanted to point out how much time students are spending in Canvas, where a great deal of curriculum exists. There's 34,783 assignments for last school year. There were 2,810 discussion topics, meaning they had an online discussion forum through Canvas. And there were 15,625 files uploaded. That would be school, student work or teacher uploading assignments. Moving down, the blue advanced placement, this is a repeat, but it kind of delineates what we said earlier, the 33% of students AP enrollment at the high school. 27% of that 33% were males, 38% of that 33% were females. And then there is the breakdown by focus group. Percent of subgroup enrolled in AP. The next line is our early college program at the high school. At the high school, we have a program where students can take classes at Delta College. They can receive an AA or AS degree, and they can also receive IGETC course accredited classes, which helps students towards enrollment in college. So at the senior level, we have 7% students enrolled. Junior level, we have 6%, and sophomore level, we have 9%. Other pupil outcomes is priority 8. You'll note here we have the ACT and SAT scores. These are performance tests that students must take to get into college, either UC, CSU, or private schools even. Some students choose to take the SAT, some students choose to take the ACT. They're not required to take both, but they are required to take one. So I just wanted to point out that the high school, Mountain House High School, in ELA for ACT, we had a 25.4%. Sorry, our students scored on average 25.4 versus the state at 22.5. In math, they scored at 23.8 versus the state at 22.5, and total 24.4 to 22.7. Now in SAT, you see similar results in that California scored in English reading and writing. California scored at 540 and the high school scored at 572. California scored at 536 in math and the high school scored at 563, with a total of 1076 versus 1135 at Mountain House High School. Those are some high-performing students. Are there any questions on that back page?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm the guy with all the questions. Flipping from on the left having Mountain House High School to California, and then on the right having California to Mountain House High School. I get that it's symmetric, but it did confuse me for a second.
We can change that.
Is on the no, I'm not. No, I'm not asking you to change it.
Okay.
I'm just because maybe I'm the only one. But I looked at the first column. Oh, it's Mountain House and then California, and then I looked at the next set of data, and was like, oh, we're underperforming. We're underperforming. And then I looked, that can't be right. And so I re-looked at it and realized that we flipped the order of the columns. But my question is on the attendance rate versus chronic absenteeism. Because looking at the attendance rate, I saw that the focus groups are pretty close to the 96% for the population, but on chronic absenteeism, the SED and SPED are, I'm going to use terrible rounding and say about twice as much. And if I understand that data correctly, what that means is a smaller percentage of, I'm going to use SPED for an example, are going absent, so they are chronic, but the remainder of the population is actually attending greater than average, which is what leads to SPED being overall 96%, which is the average of the population. Am I understanding that the way those numbers work correctly?
Yes. Or you have 3 or 4 individual students that have a great deal of chronic absences. Yeah, you said it the same way. I said it an opposite way of what you said. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Because at first I was like, how can that be? But I think I figured it out as I was thinking about it. All right.
Yes.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so kind of to surmise this is a lot of information, but we've had a lot of opportunity to start gathering data over the last couple of years. One of the challenges we had is our data was always old because schools were rolling out, they were being open, the high school in particular. But I wanted to go back. We have 3 LCAP goals, and then we have 3 working goals that are the focus of the work of the board and the superintendent and the cabinet and our district leadership team at the school sites. So we're really focused in on identifying opportunity gaps for kids, whether it's no matter what the reason is. So we have to study all the different possibilities. So some of those that we're looking at is attendance, discipline, academics, equity, involvement, and that includes co-curricular and extracurricular activities. We're looking at all of it. So it may be that a kid's doing really well in school, but they're antisocial and they're not involved in anything. And that's a problem. They're not getting a full, well-rounded experience. Or it may be that there's a group of kids we're missing academically, and we gotta flesh that out. It was the board's wisdom last year to approve the starting of a student services department, where we have one department dedicated to the health of our students, whether it's attendance or discipline or all the other things, and that's freed up the academic team to really drill down into the academics and the kids' performance on these state tests. And the state tests are just indicative of who's getting it and who's not. And it's a one snapshot of an overall 184-day effort to try to get kids to move forward. So again, the goals that we're looking on at accomplishing this year is we want to get better at what we started last year. We did small group instruction. We focused in on using data to put kids in groups and given tools from the curriculum to help them close gaps. Whether they're advanced, right there where they need to be, or they're behind, we really wanted to get targeted. And a lot of effort from our coaching, our site leadership team, hard work from our teachers. All of that goes into we need more practice, we need more reps. Second of all, when you go from a K-8 district to a 9-12 district and 5 years later, how do you sell the high school program to the K-8 schools and the K-8 schools to the high school program? You can't have a gap. And so we're spending the better part of this year really identifying how to align everybody's efforts. And then finally, just to kind of go full circle, these numbers tell us 2 things, which is there are groups of kids in one of these 5 categories, attendance, discipline, academics, equity, or involvement, who are not achieving or not having opportunities that other kids are taking advantage of, and we have to discover why. But second of all, our identified target audience, which we identified in our strategic plan back in 12, 13, 14, are not achieving academically at the same level as other groups of kids. So our intent is to deliver to the board and the community a very detailed set of data and an explanation of what we think is the cause of the good and the cause of the areas we need to get better. And then in the areas that we need to get better, we need to start coming up with plans to address those needs. These are things that will take time to resolve, but we want to be able to say, you know, in this group of kids or this group of kids, they're not participating in extracurriculars, and we've discovered this is the reason why, and here's how we're trying to address it. So to take Mr. Harrison's state priorities and then into the team's infographic to the big picture, that is our intent to execute our LCAP and our intent of meeting these goals. So if there's any big picture questions, it would be time you can ask me now. Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. That was the best question of the night. Thank you. Well, that's all right. Why is the best one? I understand Socrates was a fan of that. So Mr. Harrison has done as I've done my overview. So if no one else has any other questions, we can call this a conclusion to our first DAC meeting of the year and our review of our LCAP goals for 2018-19. It is a very good team. We have a very supportive board, and we have a committed community and a committed group of parents. This data, some of it is going to expose areas that we have to get better, and I think we ought to embrace that. That as proud as we are of what we've accomplished, there's some areas where we have to get better, and there's great stuff out there to help in areas where we need to get better, but we need to do so and let the kids tell us what's working and what's not working, and the data is going to be the journey we take. Thank you.